If you followed our updates on our Touareg on Instagram and YouTube, we've talked about this car. We bought it for 1,200 bucks. It didn't properly drive, it barely ran, and then we went through diagnosing it. It needed a cylinder head, in which our shop was doing, and they are, or were at the time, backed up and were unable to work on it consistently, so it sat for an extended period of time. It's now running and driving, so we are going to take a look at it and check it out. Since we bought this vehicle not running or driving, we really had no idea what was going on with it other than the basic aesthetic issues with the car. So this car is completely unknown to us, so we're gonna take a test drive. In between, we did verify all the engine is running fine, there's no overheating issues, and there's no surprises there. We did do the timing belt during our original job of getting the adjuster looked at, so that's all fresh, and David replaced it, so we no longer need this handy dandy glove box lid holder upper wood stick. So our first drive of this thing, V8s and Touaregs they're not slow, but they're not particularly fast either. They have an ample amount of power. That's why the VR6s are kind of dogs. This thing feels pretty solid. The whole suspension feels pretty good. I know we have a loose tie rod a little bit, so we are gonna have to replace them at some point. We knew that kind of on our first inspection. There's only one issue that it seems like we have, and we can show you what that looks like right now under hard acceleration. Doesn't sound very good. It doesn't feel good either underneath of us. So we're gonna go inspect that to see what that horrible noise is, and we'll report back.
Wow, we had to repair a lot of damage. Let's take a look.
We noticed that this issue is happening under hard acceleration. We are gonna try to duplicate it on the lift if we need to, if we can't locate where the issue is. Noises are something that I often get asked a lot of questions about on how to diagnose. People will send you a video and say, hey, what's this noise? Pretty much unless a noise is very clear, a very super common issue, diagnosing a noise is pretty much impossible from a video. The diagnosis is going to require locating where the noise is coming from as the first priority. So what I'm going to be looking for when we go underneath this thing is going to be for things like loose bushings, things like worn bushings, and things that may be loose. It was a very metallic sounding noise that was knocking. Could be either something like engine mounts, it could be something with the exhaust that's banging into something. It could be something that is just a worn mount of some kind that controls either subframes or things like that. So those are what we're gonna be looking for, and then let's get a look under there and see if we can find anything. So since our noise, we knew it was coming from the front and primarily the right front of the vehicle, we are gonna be looking kind of in this general vicinity. This is going to be something that I would guess anywhere between probably the drive shaft up to the engine mounts is where my focus is gonna be. Now, specifically because it's under acceleration, it could be suspension related, but my guess is it's probably not. It's probably engine, transmission, drivetrain kind of related. So let's get a little bit closer look. We'll start at the front and then work our way backwards. So because the noise is drivetrain related, I'm gonna start with some bushings like here. The front differential has a mount here. We're just gonna take a pry bar in there and wiggle it. Now you can look in the bushing when you get a little tighter to see, first, A, if you have movement, but B, if there's cracks in the bushing to cause any issues. Now, that bushing looks fine, and even though some bushings may have a little bit of wear on this, I expect the issue, the noise we're dealing with, is going to have a very loose feel. It's not gonna be something that just has a little bit of a crack in it. This thing's gonna be probably hollow completely to allow this much movement. On this side, same deal, we're gonna check this bushing, and this one also doesn't have anything significant in there. We do have an oil leak, which I'm pretty sure is from our valve cover gasket on our opposite side of the non-new cylinder head side. So there's that. Now we're gonna take a look at the engine mount. So this is the driver's side right here, and the passenger side is not as easy to see, which is why I'm showing you this one. Now, engine mounts are not something you're gonna be able to easily check visually. This is a rubber cover that's over top of this. You can pull that up and kind of inspect it to make sure it's not completely torn apart. But the easiest way to check engine mounts is usually going to be with brake torquing to see if the engine kind of jumps up when you brake torque. Now, to check our engine mounts, what we're going to do is get in the car, stand on the brakes, and then give some load to the engine to get that thing to torque up. And so what it's called is brake torquing. We're going to use that to see if we can get the engine to twist and see if it will kick up on one end or down on the other, which will give us the idea that we definitely have something wrong with our engine mounts. So we hear that noise duplicating. We're not having anything happen with the engine when it's happening, so we know it's not engine mount related.
Smoke.
Yeah, it's fine.
What is that smoke?
I don't know. Smells like fuel. You know how long this thing was misfiring, dude? A long time. So it was misfiring for a long time, which means all that gas has been dumping down the exhaust.
Oh yeah.
Listen to that baby purr. Woo! Now we're gonna take a look at the suspension. I don't think this is suspension related noise, but I certainly wanna check. So I'm just looking for loose bushings here. You can visually inspect them, and then you also can kind of wiggle a bunch of different things with your pry bar, and everything looks to be tight, so we don't have any issues there. I know we do have a loose inner tie rod, but that's for sure not gonna make a noise like that. You can see here, this is the bushing in the lower control arm. There's a little bit of cracking along this area, but as you can see when I wiggle it, it doesn't really have a lot of play to it at all. So that's certainly not our issue, but it eventually could become more of a significant suspension noise in the future. All right, so now we're looking at one of the exhausts here. This is the passenger side. And we are just gonna make sure that you don't have any major noises or looseness coming from any of these exhaust pieces. Now, because this was already off recently, any of this stuff that was loose up top is not an issue because we know we just had the cylinder head off. There is nothing here that's obvious. I would also check this drive shaft that goes from the transfer case up to the front differential, just to make sure the joints aren't really loose and that's what's causing the banging there. Drive shafts can be an issue on these. Not this one, but the main prop shaft. We also have a bushing up here for the rear portion of the front differential. There's a mount right here. So I'm gonna wiggle that and see. And even though there's some play there and actually a little bit of cracking, that is not gonna be enough to cause the issue that we're having. Our bushings up front are good. Now we move further back. This is not going to be transmission related, or unless it's internal, and then we'd have a serious problem. It could be related to the transfer case. There's a mount right here for the transfer case, which we can inspect this bushing to verify that thing's not banging around. And then there's also still some exhaust pipes, which all of them appear to be fine and not making any noise. So here we can wiggle the transfer case bushing, and that thing looks perfectly fine. No issues there. That thing does not have excessive play. Now the last thing I want to inspect underneath this vehicle, and I'm sure something that everybody who knows Touareg is screaming about, is the prop shaft. Now prop shafts are known for going bad. This is the center support bearing here of the prop shaft, and oftentimes the bushing in here will go bad and will blow apart. Oftentimes that can create a bunch of different things, banging noises. My first diagnostic when I was first a tech was a squealing noise coming from the center console. At high speeds that would happen. So this is fine. The reason why I know that's fine is because this thing has a new drive shaft that was replaced with an OEM drive shaft like I think 30,000 miles ago or so, but this thing has no play whatsoever and is 100% not the noise that we're hearing. I wanted to look at some notes around what they did when they replaced the drive shaft, so we found something interesting. So this is the diagram that they have printed out from it. That's a parts diagram. This is the prop shaft that goes from the rear differential to the back of the transfer case, and then that's the one that goes to the front. What they found is that the bolt holes, or these bolts, had loosened up, allowing the elongation of the bolt holes here as well as in the back of the transfer case here. So they replaced this component as well, which could be at least partially or mostly responsible for our issue, because this thing shaking around like crazy probably damaged the bearings in the back of this transfer case. So the new prop shaft here is, total paid was $1,519.54. Yeah, $1,100 for the prop shaft, the flange $189, and then all the hardware associated with it. And her total repair for everything at that time was $3,300. Yeah, expensive repair. This was at 144,000, almost 145,000 miles, so about 50,000 miles ago. Now that we've inspected all visually underneath and haven't found anything, the best thing to do now is drive it on the lift to see if we can get an idea and duplicate that noise. So we're gonna be in the car brake torquing it, and that's holding a foot on the brake while hitting the accelerator to duplicate the noise to see where it's coming from underneath. And once we do that, we'll be able to locate specifically where the noise is coming from. So the noise that we just heard is 100% coming from this transfer case. Only thing that could be in question in regards to this is going to be this stepper motor right here. So this stepper motor is going to be something that actually controls the low and high of this system. And so I did try putting it in low and high just to see if it would change or make the noise go away. One other thing we can do is unbolt this stepper motor and try it without that. I don't suspect that's going to help us, but stepper motors are somewhat common to go bad on Touaregs or can go bad on Touaregs. Usually from my experience, transfer cases and stepper motors both usually cause binding issues under hard turning, where the wheels will kind of jump and bind while you're turning in like a parking lot under a sharp condition. So we're going to take this out just to check to see if it still does it with the stepper motor out of the transfer case, and then we're going to go from there. Still does it. Still does it. So we have diagnosed our Touareg. It needs a transfer case. We're working with our friends at Wolf Auto Parts. They are a used parts place. They specialize in BMW, VW, and Audi. And so they had one of these, and they were so gracious to work with us on this. So we're going to be showing you a DIY on this stepper motor, or the transfer case assembly that we're going to install in our Touareg. We will have a complete DIY. The only thing we're waiting on is the seal between the transfer case and the transmission. I do not want to have to replace that again if it leaks, because this thing has 200,000 miles on it. And yeah, we're going to replace it and then we'll test drive it again. I've heard mention that some say Touaregs are not particularly reliable. I'll let you be the judge. Once we fix our transfer case, we finally should be able to get this thing back up on the road and perfectly drivable. We do have a few things that we need to do, namely tires. I'm trying to decide, and for the diehard fans who are still here, trying to get feedback. Maybe if you want to see a water leak diagnosis video, we're pretty sure we know exactly what's leaking on this thing, but I have been tempted to make a DIY or a video that explains how to diagnose water leaks on cars. So this is something that curious as to what the level of interest is. So leave in the comments below if you are interested in seeing a water leak video. This would apply to probably more general than not just be Touareg specific. Bye.